All right, so today we're diving into a question that's probably as old as time itself. Can men and women really just be friends?
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It really is. And for this deep dive, we took a listen to the first episode of the podcast, Just Friends,
Hmm.
the gender debate.
Yeah.
And they really get into it, all the different angles.
Oh, yeah. They brought up some really interesting points. One of the first things that jumped out at me was how they kind of challenge the very definition of friendship, when it comes to men and women. Like,
Right.
what even is it?
Well, exactly, because it's like we're almost conditioned to view any interaction between genders through this romantic lens.
Right.
It's like you can't just be friends. There's always got to be something more.
Yeah. And the podcast actually highlighted a study, I think it was from a university somewhere, that found that men are more likely to perceive friendly signals from women as having these romantic undertones.
See, it's not even always intentional, right?
No, not at all.
It's just how we've been, socialized.
Exactly. And that's kind of where things get a little messy. Because the podcast talked about how these societal norms can create all sorts of misunderstandings, especially when it comes to things like, oh, I don't know, flirting.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like what one person might see as totally harmless banter, someone else might interpret as like, a romantic advance.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of illustrate this point, they told this story, I think it's from one of the listeners, about this woman who, playfully punched her male friend on the arm, just like she would with her female friends.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
But he totally took it as a sign of attraction.
Awkward.
Super awkward. And it's like these ingrained gender roles can really trip us up.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes even deeper than that. The podcast talked about how these societal pressures can even affect how we see our own friendships. Like we might subconsciously downplay how close we are to a friend of the opposite gender just to avoid being judged or whatever.
Oh, 100%. I've totally been there, like feeling the need to label a close male friend as just a friend, just to avoid raising eyebrows.
Yeah.
But then it makes you wonder, are we doing a disservice to these friendships by letting these expectations, like, dictate how we define them?
It's a good question. And to kind of address that, the podcast brought in this relationship expert who really emphasized how important communication is in these friendships.
Yeah.
Like being upfront about your intentions, your expectations, it can go a long way in preventing misunderstandings and keeping those boundaries clear.
Right. Because it's not just about what you're putting out there, it's also about understanding your own feelings. The podcast really stressed that too.
Totally.
Like if you find yourself always questioning the friendship or feeling, I don't know, jealous of their romantic partners, maybe it's time to, do a little soul searching.
Yeah, exactly. They actually encourage listeners to really sit down and ask themselves, why do I value this friendship? What do I get out of it? That kind of thing.
So after all that, after hearing all the arguments and stories and expert opinions, where do we even land?
Well, the podcast concluded that, yeah, men and women can definitely be just friends,
Okay.
but it takes work, It
Yeah.
takes awareness, communication, and maybe even a little bit of introspection.
Yeah, for sure. And when you zoom out a little bit, it's clear that it's not just one thing.
No.
It's societal norms, personal experiences, communication styles. They all contribute to this whole complicated dance of cross-gender friendships.
It's a fascinating dynamic, that's for sure.
It really is. So, okay, we've thrown a lot of information at you. Now, here's the real question we want you to think about. What if we took all those societal expectations out of the equation? Like, poof, they're gone.
Interesting.
Would these friendships change? Would they be simpler, more authentic, or maybe even more challenging? It's something to ponder. Take a look at your own friendships. What factors are at play? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Definitely. It's a conversation worth having.
Absolutely.